Belvista Studios show.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode of the Belvista Studios show. Today, my guest is one of my favorite people in the whole world. She pushes me and holds me accountable to be a better instructional designer and also a person in the e-learning industry. She inspires me personally but also professionally, and I am very grateful and privileged to have her as a friend, but also within our team at Belvista Studios. You guys will know her if you've ever read any of our blogs, because Hannah writes all of the blogs, and she's also been sharing tips on our YouTube channel as well. So I would like to welcome to the Belvista Studio show my teammate Hannah Grennan.
Thanks, Kim. You are an absolute legend. Thank you for having me on the show. And ditto to you. I think you are super inspiring, and I'm so excited to be here. So thank you. Okay, so what I'm going to be talking about today is a project that we've worked on at Belvista Studios.
Yep.
And it's a project that we're quite proud of, Kim. So it was one where we sort of look back at it and think, oh my gosh, it was so interesting and really great, the outcome that we got from it.
Yeah.
So basically what we want to do today is just talk you through, I should say, the process that we took to come up with this solution. So I'm just going to share my screen with you.
So let you guys know as Hannah's getting that up. So the project, we were engaged by a client through a request for quote project. We really resonated with the request for quote that came out, which Hannah will now talk about in a second. But it was just... we definitely were pulled from the heart to want to work on this project, and it was very meaningful, and we resonated with it a lot. And I hope you'll be able to see that through what we talk about today, how that comes out and what it means and how you can take projects to the next level, as opposed to just working on projects that don't really have an impact, I suppose.
Definitely. This project was a wellness culture in the organisation, and Kim and I are very passionate about wellness and mental health and just living your ultimate life. So this project for us was really connected to who we are, and I think it made a really big difference to the way that we designed it, because we felt so aligned with what we could achieve with it. So yeah, the goal from this organisation was to have a wellness culture and have people more in tune with mental health, absenteeism and why people are away from work, and people being fit for work. So this was a goal that the client came to us with, and from that we had a creative conversation with them and broke down what success looked like for that goal.
Yeah.
So the success components that came through that creative conversation was that they wanted leaders to hold effective wellness conversations with their team members. So they wanted leaders to be empowered and have the confidence to be able to talk about mental health, check in with their team members, and really support this wellness culture. So our team came in, and it was our role to figure out how we could achieve that part of the wellness goal. So when we got that goal, we sort of thought, okay, if we want to teach leaders how to hold effective wellness conversations, we really want to put them into the shoes of a leader who would be having that conversation. So we wanted to make the solution really reflect the real world, and that's something that we do at Belvista Studios. We always want to make sure that the solution we make reflects the real world as much as possible, and enables them to practice skills as if they're in the shoes of someone doing it, so that when it comes to the time in real life where they need to do it, they've got the confidence and the skills to do that. So this was a really good one for us, because we thought, this is awesome. We can get leaders to step into the shoes of someone holding a wellness conversation and replicate that through the online environment. So that's when we started coming up with a solution, and we thought, okay, so we want leaders to be able to have these conversations. How can we... and feel free to say anything, Kim, or pipe in if anything comes to mind. But we were thinking, okay, how can we figure out what a good wellness conversation looks like? Because we're not the experts on that. We don't know exactly how a leader would do that if they were successful.
Yeah.
So what we did was we wanted to look at the data that we had, and that was models. So the organisation already had conversational leadership models embedded in their culture and in their organisation. So we looked at those models, and then we also did an observation. So Kim went in, and it was two people that were good at, or one person who was good at holding wellness conversations sort of did that, like had a conversation, did it well, and modelled the behaviours that a good wellness conversation looks like.
Yep. So that was actually, sorry, just to add in there, like it was an expert in terms of psych, so knowing how to use the right framing and language to hold a specific conversation. Also a key stakeholder, so very bought into the outcome and what we were trying to achieve through this project. And the other person happened to be from the L&D team. So they had an idea of what we were trying to achieve and could play the staff member role. And I have to say, like, I actually put them on the spot for that observation. So I just went in to listen and hear from them. And then I said, hey, this is great, but like, can I just hear what a good one sounds like? Because they were telling me the models, like, this is what they need to use, and I'm like, wonderful, but can you guys just do it? So I literally pulled out my phone and started recording them. And I don't know, it was like maybe, I'll say 7 minutes in duration, but it just flowed. And that was actually the exact conversation that we used later on in the solution. So it just shows that if you get people that are high performing or do things really well and you observe them doing it, you can pull out those key behaviors that then become the foundation of the rest of your training. So I definitely recommend doing that.
Yeah, I really loved that component of it, the observation part, because I feel like sometimes we can think that we're designing a solution that's the best, but it doesn't really work unless you can see what it would look like in the real world. And I loved how you could see the body language and you could take notes of the statements that they said. And I remember hearing the conversation, it was recorded, and it was so good. I couldn't believe someone could do that so well on the spot. Like, it was amazing, someone who was so good at it that we could use that as a sort of starting point for designing the solution.
Yeah. Because I think at that stage as well, they'd just given us like, here's our policies, here's our guidelines, here's intranet resources, here's things, other training and initiatives around the organization that are happening. So we had lots of content, but instead of going through that to break down the actions and behaviors that were required for the training, I was like, yeah, well, what does this look like in the real world? AKA, go and do it and show me what a high performer would do in this situation.
Yeah, awesome. So once we had that information, so we had the observation and the models, it was my role. So Kim sent me off to do the instructional design component.
Can you, Hannah, just share what like the models are, like what that actually looks like or what you received?
Yeah, so some of the models were, I don't have them ready to show right now, but there was models like leadership. I think it was like this is one of them, the listening model. So we basically got, I think there was probably like 7 models or something like that. And it was, for an example, it was like the 6 levels of listening, and it may be like, don't interrupt, listen to understand, and they were listed out. And I basically went through all of these models and picked out the components of the model that were relevant to wellness conversations.
Yeah.
So it was basically a process of analysing the models that they had. And it means, I think this is a really important point, because it means you don't need to recreate the wheel. You don't need to go. Sometimes you have to go and research and find all this information, but the fact that this client already had these models was amazing, because it meant that we had the information there, and what we were going to take from those models was already aligned to what they were doing in the organisation.
Yeah, that's so true, actually, because the client basically was like, look, this is not the only thing that we're trying to do for our supervisors and leaders, like wellness conversations. We're trying to develop their skills. These are the models we've identified across the organization that we're trickling within initiatives. So it was basically skills of supervisors, but they'd identified specific models or learning models or leadership models, such as like the SCARF model and things like that, that they were applying. So they'd asked us to think about how that could influence the solution that we came up with as well.
Definitely. And I think it's a good point as well for like a message for our clients, people in that space who are partnering with an e-learning studio, partnering with someone who's helping them design a solution to provide models like that, because it can really help the designer create a solution that's aligned to them.
Yeah.
And it's not just a solution that could fit anyone. It's like a solution that's very customized and aligned to their culture and the models that they use.
Yeah.
So it's probably good for people out there to provide that sort of information. And us as instructional designers can look through and think, okay, that's not relevant, that's relevant.
Yeah.
But if we at least have the information, we can go through and have a look and see what can add value.
Yeah. I think it tells you a lot about the organization as well, like the kind of behaviors that they're aspiring to have or that they're trying to clarify as expectations for their staff. The different models, like whether they choose this listening model or another one, or you know how there's like the hamburger effect and then it's like, oh, don't, or it's the keep it short and simple for feedback. Like every organization's different. And I think it says a lot about the culture. So to have a better learning solution, you kind of need to look at, well, what is the existing culture and what's the aspiring culture, and performance expectations and objectives, and find a balance. Because sometimes I know we've been quite ambitious and said this is like the perfect human that you could create for this situation, but they're so not back in the day, but they're not evolved to be able to handle the behavior change that we're putting in there. So they almost need like stepping stones, because we're trying to get them to like a 10-year down the track end goal of what the person should look like, whereas they're only ready for step one, which is like baby steps.
That's such a good point. Think of the importance of, we absolutely love human-centered design. So we use it for all of our projects, and we just believe in the process and know that it has successful outcomes. And I think considering who your user is, so the people that are going to be completing the solution, can really help you design a solution that's fit for purpose.
Yeah.
So what you were saying then, it makes me think about, we could design for this situation, we could design this amazing simulation or conversation scenario, but they may not be ready for that. They might be at a completely different level and we've taken it too far.
Yeah.
And it's not fitting with where they're at. So I think that's really interesting as well, understanding who the user is, and then also using the models to pick out what's relevant and what's going to be useful for those particular users.
Yeah. Yeah, cool.
Nice. So basically, my role was, I basically grabbed bite-sized actions from the observation that Kim had done, as well as the models that we received. So I had a list of actions, and they were actions that were all going to lead to a good wellness conversation. So if supervisors or leaders took these actions, then it's likely that they would hold a successful wellness conversation.
Yeah.
So an example of breaking down a model into actions. So the 6 levels of listening model, 2 of the actions that I found was don't interrupt the speaker and listen to understand, not respond. So that was the first stage of the process. We knew that we needed to somehow incorporate these actions into the learning solution and train the leaders on how to demonstrate those actions.
Yeah. Can you remember, were they from the model itself, or is it because you listened to that conversation that was recorded that you were able to identify those 2 bite-sized actions there?
So I think most of the actions came from the models that we received.
Okay,
so
cool.
the analysis that I did was on the models.
Yep.
The observation of the conversation was probably more giving us context. Like we did get some actions from that, but context of how the conversation would look.
Yep.
And helping us design this conversation in that way. But I think, most of my analysis was on the models and grabbing actions from those models.
Yeah, cool. Okay. So those 2 bite-sized actions, would they be 2 of the levels within that listening model, or was it even broken down further?
So
you
that
might not
would
be
have
able to
been,
remember because it was so long ago, but
It would have been like levels of the model. Like there would have been a point that said, don't interrupt. Like I'd probably simplified it. There could have been a whole paragraph around not interrupting and listening, seeking to understand before responding.
Yeah.
But these was like the simple at the core actions that came from those models.
Yeah, cool. Very good. Okay, thanks.
Importance of breaking down the information, probably the need to know information when we talk about what's nice to know and not what's need to know information.
Yeah.
Figuring the need to know information from each model.
Yeah. Cool.
So once we have those bite-sized actions, it was around, because we're creating this solution as a conversation, we want to put them in the shoes of someone having a wellness conversation. The next stage was breaking the bite-sized actions into a script. So thinking, okay, if this is an action that we want the supervisors to take when they're holding this conversation, what could that look like in the real world and how would that play out?
Yeah.
So this is an example for the don't interrupt the speaker action. This is how it could look in the real world. The team member could be talking. So this is the team member that the supervisor is interacting with, is talking when a pop-up appears, and the pop-up says, you have advice to offer in relation to what they have been saying. Do you offer it now? So then the learner has the opportunity to say, okay, the team member is talking, so I am going to be interrupting, and they wouldn't see this part. They would just be presented with this scenario as if it was happening in the real world. And then they make a decision as to whether they want to offer that advice and interrupt the team member or hold back and let the team member speak. So this was an example of how we could basically teach them not to interrupt the speaker, and this is a situation they would be in that conversation scenario.
Yeah, cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So we will show this example of the e-learning course at the end. And just to probably clarify as well, this project was given to us saying that the solution must be e-learning at the end. So that's why the product is that way. But yeah, we'll show it to you guys shortly.
Yeah. So once we had that, this is the next level. So there was quite a few levels of breaking it down, which I think is really important. But once we had the realistic situation that aligned with that bite-sized action, we wanted to make sure that the feedback reinforced their behavior or shared with them why they didn't get it right or why they did get it right. So basically linking the feedback linked back to the bite-sized action. So an example here was if they decided to interrupt, the feedback would be, this is an example of level 2 listening. The team member is trying to express what is happening to them, though you found a chance to interrupt. Despite the value of advice you have, it's always best to listen and seek to understand first.
Yeah.
So what we're doing through this scenario or part of the conversation is showing the supervisor or leader to not interrupt and to always listen and seek to understand first. So that's a behavior that we want to train.
Yeah. Cool.
And it was reinforced through the feedback that we created.
Yeah. And I think there's a few things happening in your feedback there as well. Like it's not just correct, incorrect. So it's a branching scenario. This is just one part of the branching scenario, but you're giving them, you've made the right decision or incorrect. This is probably what you were thinking and why you made the decision that you did. But so I'm just trying to break it down as we go. These are the consequences of your decision, and then reinforcing whether you're incorrect or correct. We're reinforcing the behaviors and recognizing the behaviors that we actually want the learner to have, which is seek to understand and listen. Yeah,
definitely. Another part of this as well, what we did was to ensure that it reflected the real world. We wanted them to experience how that other person may react.
Yeah.
So the way that designed the conversation scenario, the person that they were speaking to would have a reaction that would reflect the real world. So they may, if the learner decided to interrupt, the person would respond and say, oh, that doesn't sound like something that I would do.
Yeah.
And then they sort of cut off and then the flow of the conversation stops. So they experience, okay, if I interrupt, that may potentially happen. I could cut the conversation short. The the person won't share any more information with me, and what I've offered might not even be relevant.
Yeah.
So that was a big part of it as well, getting them to see the reaction of the person that they're talking to. And we did our best to replicate what would happen in the real world.
Yeah.
So we'll see that when we go through the online module that we created for it, example.
Can I ask, so from doing this task as an instructional designer, I think what would be going through people's heads is like, it seems like a lot of effort, this breaking down the bite-sized actions, and it can be quite easy to just jump in and start typing and trying to pump out content. Talk us through the value that this process had for you by mapping it out like this, because you did start, I can't remember, you might have even started with pen and paper, but it definitely came to me as a peer reviewer as a Word document. So talk us through the process and how that helped your instructional design process by breaking it down into bite-sized actions. So just to remind people and refresh, it was basically we had a learning behavior we needed to train. What does that look like in the real world? Which you can see here, the team members talking. You want to give advice, you want to help, something happens, you make a decision. The decision is made, feedback is received. And that's just one small component of a bigger branching scenario that maybe had 10 to 12 total decision points. What are your thoughts, Hannah?
So it did take more effort. Like, definitely it took time. I remember working on this task and just breaking it all apart took probably a day to complete, just figuring out all these separate components. But I remember thinking as I was doing it, because it was probably earlier on when I was learning instructional design, because you were mentoring me through this, I remember thinking it sort of clicked, and I had a feeling that this project was going to be amazing, because I don't know how to explain it, but it was almost like, oh my gosh, like I think like the effort that you put into breaking it apart and finding those small actions is so important to create a solution that makes the difference. Because we could have just thought, okay, what would a good wellness conversation look like? And then written a random conversation. It would have been a lot more, like, it'd be quicker to do and wouldn't take as long.
Yeah.
But I think the fact that we broke it apart, use their models, use what we saw in the observation, and focused on it as small different actions, it made such a big difference. And I think we talk about that often, how we need to train on specific actions. It's really helpful if you can list out what actions the learner would need to take to be successful, and then incorporate those actions into the bigger picture. But yeah, what's your view on that? Because I know you sort of trained me on doing instructional design in that way and really pulling things apart, and I definitely see that it has. Yeah, what's your perspective on it?
Well, I think what I can take in terms of good feedback on that, taking the time to break it down. I know at the time, like it did take a whole day to break it up like this for one activity, but the value that took was better planning led to better execution, led to a better solution. And how we know that is that when it was provided to me as peer feedback, I remember getting the Word document and having a look through and having very minimal changes to be made. So instead of me taking half a day to give feedback, I probably finished my peer review within an hour and a half, because it was to such a great standard. And then the second part of that was when it went to the client in the same condition as a Word document, they had very minimal feedback. And I would say that is success right there, because I was concerned that it would be too complex, and it might not be hitting their objective from their perspective, even though I really trusted our process and the solution that we were presenting. But I feel that, they had like a couple of minor, it wasn't even like structure changes or anything like that. It was just like, instead of using supervisor, use manager, or, tweaks like that are so insignificant on the scheme of changes that you could get back from a client. So I would say the value in taking the time up front to do the planning and breaking down these bite-sized actions is really, really important.
Definitely. I agree.
Cool. What else?
So once we had these components, the next stage, which was I remember thinking, oh, how am I going to get my head around this? But basically I had these actions with scripts attached to the actions to achieve those actions.
Yeah.
And we needed to put it into a conversation that was realistic. So we had all these different mini scripts, and it was about putting those scripts in order and potentially adjusting the mini scripts so that we could create a conversation that flowed, was engaging, and reflected the real world. So that was the next stage of the process. And what I did was I had all of the different scripts there, and it was just about, okay, looking at and listening to that observation recording that you had done with the client and thinking, okay, this is the order of how it would happen. Thinking, okay, when could the interruption part happen? When could this part happen? And putting it into a rough order.
Yeah.
So when you received that too, like it sort of just worked. It was really, it was how it just happened to work out really well. But the mini scripts really fit into place. And I think it worked because of all of the effort we put in at the beginning.
I agree.
So the time into understanding what's involved in a good conversation, the different components, it was almost natural putting it into an order for a conversation. Started off as overwhelming, but then it sort of fell into place. And I remember sending it through to you and thinking, oh, this is amazing. Like, I'm so excited for the client to see this. It just felt so right, what we'd created.
And I think I do remember that actually you were really proud to hand this over. So this was a time when you were learning. You were already doing instructional design, but I'd say you're going to a deeper level and higher, more advanced instructional design skill set. And to be in a learning situation yourself and have like a stretch project or a challenge like this that you're not naturally used to then being like, and it can be overwhelming and all that kind of stuff. And so you've got all these emotions going through your mind, and like you're obviously trying to like do well for the team and not let us down and all those kinds of things. But I remember you being so excited and proud to share your first draft. And I just think that's an amazing thing to also reinforce trust the process, because it would be very easy to not be in that situation when you're learning and you don't know what you're doing and you're just kind of going, what the hell? But yeah, I think that's cool.
Well, yeah, that was a big, I think, in my career where I realized the importance of planning and taking the time at the beginning of a project to really pull things apart and make sure that what you're designing is fit for purpose, because once you do that, I feel like the rest flows so much more. And it was a really cool process to do, and definitely handing it over, I was so excited because I was like, oh my gosh, we've covered like all the point, like the important need to know information in the model. We've done the observation. We've got all these many actions that we want them to meet. And it's like in this conversation that flows and that reflects what would happen in the real world. It just felt like a really cool project. And we've like always said that about that project. It just worked.
Yeah.
And I think it probably was our passion for the topic as well. It just really got us excited and we were really proud of what we created. So yeah, so that was a process that I took and Kim took as well. Kim mentored me through. So yeah, just to recap, it's using models and observation, finding bite-sized actions, which is need to know information from that, and then having those bite-sized actions into mini scripts if you're creating a conversation scenario.
Yep.
Creating feedback to reinforce behavior, and then putting the mini scripts into a larger conversation script. So I think that probably covers the process that we took.
Yeah.
Was there anything else, Kim, that I've missed or?
No, but I'd say like in terms of like, I don't know if they're called models or methodologies or whatever that were used, would be definitely human-centered design. And then Kathy Moore's action mapping, because I think this may be when you were reading the Map It book as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
Probably another tip as well that's just popped into my head. It can be really easy to do this, and I know I wanted to do this, but I was like, follow the process, like do the proper instructional design to get it right. But when you're creating something like this, I was so tempted to go, okay, like, where's the conversation going to happen? What's the character going to look like? What's their name going to be? And really into details that weren't important at that stage of the project. So I think it's really important to get the core part of the conversation, the intent behind why the conversation is happening, and get those little bite-sized actions all sorted out before you even start thinking about who the character is, what their name is, where it is.
Yeah.
Like, I think that really made an impact as well. And I often want to do that because that's sort of the fun part, creating what the character looks like, the reactions and all of that. So I think that's probably another tip as well.
That's a really good tip. And to extend on that, when we give clients the first draft of a storyboard, it's always just content. So it's never got any color or any, if we have anything, it's literally a rectangle that says button or text or image, or a stick man. So it doesn't have anything that can confuse them and get them hung up on the solution itself, because we want them to focus on the content to begin with.
Yeah, I love that. Because it's interesting, because some developers or e-learning instructional designers go straight into development, don't they?
Yeah. Which is,
they don't which, like, I don't know if it's right or wrong, but it's just interesting because I know we've always done that.
Yeah, it's so true. And when Kath Ellis does that, and she's like amazing. And when I hear her talk about why she does it that way, I'm just like, it makes so much sense. But it's like, I think I'm just so stuck in my ways and have done it this way because I've made mistakes and learnt in the past, or trying to put improvement places so we don't mess up or have the struggles that we've had on our end when we haven't done it. But definitely, she'll just jump in and start wireframing and developing and putting content in there, and it's like pretty much she's prototyping from the very beginning, but it works for her, and she's getting fantastic results that way. So I guess understand your own process of working. Maybe we could find efficiencies to move to that kind of approach as well. We're just not there yet. It makes me nervous, but yeah.
No, I guess everyone's different. Everyone has different working styles and what works for them. And potentially it sounds like I haven't seen a lot of what Kath has done, but I've heard she's pretty awesome. She's mentioned a lot.
Definitely.
I'm thinking her instructional design skills would be a crazy level of awesome, and she's able to do that all in her head and just develop straight away.
Yeah,
whereas
actually,
I'm probably
that's a good point.
I need to get on paper and, I need to get it on paper and list it out and make sure that what I'm doing makes sense. And I'd love to be level one day like Kath and you.
Well,
you're amazing.
Already getting there, and it's just everyone works differently. It's just how we digest information, how we communicate, all those kinds of things. Even I can see your evolution getting there already. So yeah, don't be stressing about that. I struggle. Anyway, go on, continue, take us through it.
Okay, so that was the process in creating the conversation scenario. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you what that looks like in action. So you can see we have told the learner we want to put you in the shoes of someone. So this is a performance conversation example. We couldn't replicate the exact project that we did with this client, but this is what you can create from using a process like this.
Yeah. So we've reframed the wellness conversation to pretend that it's a performance conversation, because obviously we can't share the client's project. The client's project was built in Storyline 360, but for the purposes of this demo, we've rebuilt it in Rise.
Yeah. So yeah, we tell the learner you're going to step into the shoes of someone who's facilitating a performance conversation, and the intent of it is having a safe place for them to practice. So enabling them to practice this conversation in a safe environment before they get out there in the real world and need to hold an actual conversation like this. So we share that information with them. We tell them what the scenario demonstrates. So this is what you're going to get from completing the scenario. And then it goes straight into meeting the person that they're about to have a conversation with. So we provide some background information. This is the person that we're meeting with, and this is the situation. So it just gives them some context. Okay, I'm stepping into the shoes of someone who's about to have a conversation with this person. So in this situation, it was a performance conversation. Someone's performance had declined, and basically you need to talk and what's going on and solve that situation.
Yeah, and I'll just add, like, I think good instructional design doesn't preface the activities with all the learning content. So in this instance, you can see literally you are about to hold the conversation. So we haven't gone through all the models of listening and here's all the things that you need to do as a good supervisor that holds these kinds of performance conversations. We've actually literally just gone, have the conversation, go do it now, and you're going to learn through doing and the feedback that's presented through the activities. So there is no learning content up front. Any learning content is in the doing, and then to reinforce that, the behaviors and actions, it's in the feedback, which you'll see in the interactions now.
Yeah, and I like that as well. It makes me think, like, tell me if you have a different perspective. But I think good e-learning is when the learner doesn't even realize that all these models are incorporated. That's like next level if we could. And I know we have been able to do it with a lot of projects where we don't even need to mention the name of the model. It's just incorporated and part of the solution. And I think that's really good e-learning when you're completing it and you're thinking none of this is like reading a model. Like it's not boring. It's actually in the real life situation. Because in the real world, you're not going to be standing there with your model, staring at the model and going, all right, wait 1 minute, I just need to look at this model.
Yeah.
I think it's important to get them to show them what the actual actions look like.
Exactly. And like all the models and stuff are available on Google for free. So if supervisors or anyone doing training wanted to learn that kind of stuff, they'd be on Google. So that's why this is a practice thing. And I really like that you've picked up on, they shouldn't even know. Because I know we had the bite-size action was like the 6 levels of listening, but that language is not, that was for our understanding and mapping as an instructional designer, but within this solution it's never mentioned.
So the solution starts, you're about to hold a conversation with her, select what you would like to say from the options on screen to continue the conversation. So the person speaks to you and it replicates how a conversation would actually happen. So the person says, or Mia says, you wanted to speak with me. And then you have the option of 2 responses to that. So you can say, I've noticed over the past month that your reports have had errors and you've been absent at least 1 day a week. What's been going on? Or you can say, it's hard for me to bring this up, but I've noticed you're absent quite often and your performance has declined recently. So it's only subtle differences between the 2 responses, but we basically wanted leaders to go, okay, what would I actually say in this situation out of those 2 responses? So I'll let you pick, Kim. What would you say?
Well, I guess just to get into it first is like, it doesn't need to be like the obvious right one and the obvious wrong one. You know, you should be trying to see what goes through people's heads when this is happening. And some people, like number 2 is a lot of people, they try to apologize for having these kinds of conversations in the first place. And it's your role as a manager to have those conversations. So you're not in the wrong. You're doing your job. You're doing what you get paid to. These are the expectations. But as human beings, we don't have the confidence or the skills to have these conversations. So then we try to make us feel okay and the other person feel okay so that we can be friends afterwards to feel comfortable. So that's why we have apologized, even though we still identify the behavior. So let's go number 2.
Okay. Hard for me to bring this up. So then you get a response, her expression changes, and she says, sorry, I'm not absent that often, and I don't know what you mean by declined work performance. I can't say I really understand where this is going. So then as a learning this response, like she hasn't really responded well, like let's find out. Continue.
Actually, I should say it's not possible in Rise, but in the real one, in Storyline, if you think about feedback, there's people's body language, there's what they say to you. In the storyline version, we had what they were thinking as well. So I think Mia was like, I don't know what she specifically said or thought in that particular part of the scenario, but throughout it, she was like, you don't respect me, or I don't respect you. Like, there was different things that she was thinking, but then she was saying something totally back different to you as the supervisor.
Yeah. So that, yeah, the way you open the conversation has resulted in Mia becoming uncomfortable and defensive. Be specific about what you have observed. So in that option that we selected, we didn't actually say what Mia was doing to show that her work performance was declining. So that was one of the behaviours we wanted to train, being specific what you're seeing. So rather than you coming to me and saying, Hannah, what you're doing is not good enough, like your performance isn't good enough, the right thing for you to do would be, Hannah, when you write blogs, your spelling is not good enough, like you need to fix that spelling, and be really specific around what part of my performance I need to improve. So there was that, and then also seeking to understand first. So we really wanted to support leaders in understanding what the situation was from that other team member before making assumptions and saying this isn't good enough.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and you can see that was a bite-sized action that we had part of the instructional design that we were actually showing you earlier. Like, one of the little things was seek to understand. So that's how this was handled in this situation. Also, as you continue, I'll just say the feedback, whether you get it right or wrong, reinforce the behaviors which we spoke about. In Rise, it's developed slightly different, but you'll notice that you're forced to pick the right example now, so that you've seen it before, you didn't make the decision, now we're making it obvious this time again, showing you this is the right decision. So you're not having, as a learner, cognitive load to think back to, oh, whoa, what was the right thing I was meant to say? So we're just giving it to you now.
Yeah. So it's like, your last response probably wasn't the best option. So this is what we suggest. So then the learner can read through and go, okay, so I've noticed over the past month that your reports have had errors. So they could make that connection and think, okay, so that's the example of the performance. So they know why.
Yep.
Absent 1 day a week. So that's something they've observed, and then seeking to understand what's going on for you. So then they can make that note and go, okay, so I would say what I've observed, and then I would also ask and seek to understand what's going on for them.
Yeah, cool. Do you want to flick through it quickly and get to where it interrupts, which is the action and behavior that we were doing earlier, the interruption one? So I think it's coming up now. So she's in a funk, basically. Oh, we got it right then, did we? Or wrong? I don't know. Anyway, continue listening.
So you can either continue listening or interrupt. I think there was a part where you could offer advice and say you should do this.
Yeah. So she's feeling a bit down lately. Oh, well, I've heard in the past that. Oh, here it is.
You have information to share. Your friend has been raving about a positive talk show on YouTube, and you think it could be perfect for Mia. And that's, like, it's something that does happen in the real world. I know if someone's sharing a problem that they have, like, in my head I'm thinking, oh, what's the solution? I do it all the time. I come up with the solutions. I have to sort of stop myself from and trying to offer a solution. So I think it is, like, it makes sense that leaders would do this.
Yeah. Well, as human beings, we want to help each other. So even though our intent to help is by sharing something that you believe might add value to their life, it's not always what the other person needs.
Yeah, definitely. So you have this information to share, and then you have a decision. So you can either tell her about the YouTube talk show series or don't tell her about the series. So
tell her.
And then it's like, oh, I was just about to say I tried listening to them, but it didn't work. So you interrupted her. She was halfway through her sentence saying that I used to listen to positive YouTube videos, and she was about to say it doesn't work, but you've interrupted and said that. So it just shows, like, you need to let people finish what they're saying and allow them to express themselves before solving the problem. So that was another action that we wanted to train. So that's it it really. It just goes through. We made sure all of the actions that were our need to know actions were incorporated into the conversation. And this was part of a bigger training piece. So we had, I don't know if we want to go into that, but there was other components that helped that be effective. So starting off with the leader understanding the why, we really wanted them to feel a connection to wellness. Because I think that's an important thing as well. You can create this amazing solution that shows them exactly what they need to do, but if they're not motivated or don't think that doing that action is going to make a difference or is worth doing, they're not going to do it, no matter how good the solution is.
That's so true.
So that was an important part of the process for us, helping them understand the why and get that engagement from the very beginning.
Yeah. Can you stop sharing your screen, because you don't have anything else to share, do you, visually?
No, that's it.
Cool, because I think it's like a bit funny when it's just our little voices up there. So, yeah, it definitely opened with the why, and that motivation, which we identified, allowed us to set the scene and see that this training course had a benefit to them as a human being, and it wasn't just in the workplace, it was who they were at home as well. What else did it have?
Yeah. So yeah, it had the why. It also got them to consider their own wellness. So we wanted them to build empathy for wellness. And I think if you can connect something to your own personal experiences in your life, it can help you understand how it can positively impact others.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had a part in there about them reflecting on what would they rate their wellness in these different areas and what could they do to improve, just to get their mindset into, oh wow, like I don't exercise enough and sometimes I do feel like tired and it probably is because I'm not exercising, so I should do that more. And then they realize the value and go, wow, like wellness is important. So we had that. And then it was the observation. So it was sort of like a podcast format, I think, where they could listen to the conversation.
Actually, sorry to interrupt you. I was just going to say on that. So the observation was like literally what we recorded that earlier time was put into the module, and that exact conversation followed the scenario that you guys have just seen. We ended up, like it was exactly that. We ended up at the client's request because they didn't like hearing their own voice recording it. So we had to do we needed a transcript anyway, but we did a transcript, and within the team, we played the roles and we just recorded it like we're doing this now. So it was nothing fancy. We didn't have voiceover artists. We didn't have any actors. We just played those roles, and that audio file is, and the client was stoked. They were like, oh my god, sounds so professional. Meanwhile, it's like me and Victoria. She was a brat. But no, it was so it just shows like that the power of doing that thing up front has then sewed the whole solution together, because it was a model for the actual conversation. It gave us specific things that we could put into that scenario, and then we could use that exact conversation to have as a, hey, now you've played it. And the reason we had it was we were like, well, people are going to be like, yeah, it's very easy to do that in e-learning, isn't it? So we wanted to show them how that could, what it would play out like in the real world, so they listen to that conversation happen as well. And it was things like, there was a point where it was like a leave the silence, and then the chick, like, she actually like solved her own problem because the supervisor was able to just leave the silence, and then the person was like, oh, but blah blah blah. So that was really cool.
Yeah, it was a good combination. I liked that we had this scenario where they could practice, and then they could also hear what it sounds like when people in the real world are doing it. I think it allows people to learn in different ways, and yeah, I thought it was such a great solution. It's definitely one that I'm really proud of, and one of my favorites.
Same, definitely. And I know the client liked it, but yeah, we always talk about it. And if you are interested in learning more about it, we've done a case study on it. So jump onto the Creator Hub. So creatorhub.belvistastudios.com. The free case study of this project is in there, and you actually get the link to that Rise demo that we were showing, so you can play with the solution yourself and really break it down and do whatever you want with it. Well, don't steal it. Nah, jokes.
Share it with your friends for a Christmas gift.
Ooh.
Yeah, so that's probably it from me, unless you have anything else to add, Kim.
Well, I think just in terms of the key takeaways that I wrote down was make sure your learning objectives are actions, so not just saying things. So, what would they look like in the real world? A way that I like to frame it for people is if you were a fly on the wall, what would you see someone do if they did that learning objective? And as an instructional designer, like we're not experts in wellness, we're interested in it, but the less you know as an instructional designer, the better. Well, I wouldn't say the better, but you're in a good position. So never be turned off by the learning solution that you're trying to create just because you're not an expert, because then you allow yourself to trust the process, the instructional design process, and do it properly and give people what they need, as opposed to what you think they need. And that's where subject matter experts or people that are too close to the topic fall down and give information overload because they give too much to people. But I think the less you know about a topic, or if you can pull yourself and pretend that you know nothing, if you are an expert, trust the process of your instructional design, like human-centered design action mapping, then you'll be able to create a better solution. What else? And they were the key takeaways and the resources that we'll share. Kathy Moy, big shout out every time to you, we'll send, like, she's got a blog on how to write an effective business goal. Human-centered design, obviously we've used approaches in this project to get to the learning solution. Map It was Kathy Moore's book as well, so we were practicing applying those particular behaviors ourselves. And also in terms of like the proposal, because it was a request for quote, and I guess we have a proposal template which is on the Creator Hub that you can have a look at, and that is the exact proposal template that we use within our when our request for quote comes through. But what it allowed us to do, and like they obviously, when they go out for quotes, they go out to more than one person or company or whatever it is, but what that allowed us to do is it's allowed us to communicate the passion and our approach and how we will solve their problem and how we can communicate what's in our heads, because we always brainstorm what do we want to do for this before we've even been engaged. So the proposal template allows us to communicate that so that a client can really see what they're going to get if they engage you, and I think that's really important. So maybe you want to have a look at that if this is like part of your role as well. That's all I got to share, but thank you so much for being on the show, Hannah. I'm really stoked to be able to learn and have, like, it's a good refresher process to revisit our own projects like that, and I definitely have been getting so much value from the shows that we've been recording with others. And like what I absolutely love is like the value that people bring by being able to see the solutions. And like in our team, this is our 3rd episode now, we have implemented so much already from the first two show episodes. So I love having these conversations, and in future you will be co-hosting with me, so I'm excited for that.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So the first thing was, I just wanted to thank John Hinchcliffe, was the idea mastermind behind this, and just watching the first 2 episodes, I've just seen the value that it's brought. So thank you so much, John, for sharing that idea.
Yeah, he told us to do this. He was like, you guys need to have a show where you interview people and see good examples. And so grateful.
So super grateful for John, and it's adding so much value. So it just feels so good that we've been able to connect with him and bring his idea to life. So you are an absolute legend, John. Thank you so much. And the other thing was, you were talking about human-centered design. That is our absolute favorite process. And I'm super excited because we're creating a human-centered design. Well, hopefully we can get ours, but if anyone's interested in human-centered design, it's the process that our team loves. Check out the Creator Hub. We've got a human-centered design course on offer.
Yeah.
And a passion project for you and I, Kim. We just love it, and I get so excited even talking about it. So if anyone's interested in human-centered design as well, we'll share that in the resources.
Yeah. I think the value that human-centered design has brought to my own development is, like, you can do instructional design and do good instructional design, but I think human-centered design really took my skills to the next level in a way that is just wow. Like, I'm just like, how did I not do that before? It just makes so much sense. So it really allows you to empathize with other people, to put everything you know behind you, to identify the real problem that you're trying to solve and the needs of your learners. How do you put them at the heart of your solution? So what questions can you ask to get the information you need as an instructional designer to create a better solution? What does the world of your learner look like? What are their frustrations? What are their challenges? What do they need? What are the resources that will help them? What are all the things in their life that make them who they are? And knowing that information is so key, and I believe it really takes your instructional design skills to the next level by learning human-centered design. So like, that's part of what we do now. It's ingrained. Luckily now we've been doing it for a bit, so it's our habit, but I just can't understand how we did what we did before that. So yeah.
The best. It honestly does, like, to the way you design. And I would not be able to, it would be hard to design without human-centered design.
Yeah,
I'll be like, this is weird, I don't like it.
Once you know, what is that like? Yeah, you know it, you can't go back kind of thing, like
100%.
it's crazy. Okay.
So much. Like, I've been so excited about being on the show because I've loved watching the first 2 episodes. So yeah, I've been like, oh, ever since we spoke about this episode. So thank you, and thank you to our community. You're freaking amazing, and I hope that you gained value from this episode.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hannah, for sharing your value. Always appreciate you. You're amazing. Thanks everyone for watching. If you know someone that should be on this show so we can have a look at some awesome e-learning or instructional design solutions and be inspired and inspire everyone else, please let us know. We would love to have some more guests on here, and have an awesome day.